picture this. You're looking at a desolate gray landscape. It is definitely not the romantic sun-drenched desert of a typical cowboy movie featuring, majestic mesas and clear blue sky.
Oh, definitely not. It's basically a miserable post-apocalyptic looking wasteland.
Right. It's just churning with this thick, wet mud. And through this muck, a lone, mud-soaked man is trudging forward. And he is dragging something incredibly heavy behind him. A full-sized wooden coffin.
Yeah, and the sound is just as jarring. It's not a soaring, majestic orchestra playing some triumphant melody.
No, it's this bizarre, pulsing musical score, which is suddenly just violently pierced by a woman's primal, terrifying screech.
It is a completely jarring image, and it's paired with an even more jarring sound. Within seconds, it entirely shatters your expectations of what a Western is supposed to be.
Exactly.
You instantly know you are not in a John Wayne movie anymore.
Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Yeah.
Today we're decoding the wild, subversive, and honestly brilliant world of the 1960s Italian Western.
We've got a great stack of sources today, too. We're looking at essays from Senses of Cinema, some deep film score reviews, an excerpt from an Arrow video release.
We are zooming in specifically on the brutal visual work of director Sergio Corbucci. And our mission today is to reveal how their radical artistic choices didn't just stay in the 1960s, they formed the actual DNA of modern cinema.
Especially Quentin Tarantino's film, The Hateful Eight.
Yeah, the connections there are wild. Now, a quick heads up to you, our listener, before we really get into the mud here.
Yeah.
To understand directors like Corbucci, we do have to look at the highly charged political themes that fueled them.
Things like Marxism, anti-capitalism, and revolutionary politics, right?
Right. But we aren't taking any political sides here today. We're simply unpacking the filmmaker's artistic intentions impartially, just to understand the art itself as presented in our sources.
Because these films were so much more than cheap cowboy knockoffs.
They really were. They were profound allegories wrapped in the guise of pulp entertainment. Okay, let's unpack this.
To really understand how they dismantled the traditional American Western, we have to start with Corbucci's breakout masterpiece from 1966. Django.
Right, the movie with the guy dragging the coffin.
Exactly. Corbucci made a very deliberate, aggressive choice to just strip away all the heroism and romance we usually associate with the frontier.
The visuals alone tell that story perfectly. Django stars Franco Nero, who was actually only 24 years old at the time.
Which is crazy when you look at him in the film.
Yeah, they had to cake him in makeup to artificially age him up, making him look weathered and exhausted and tough. He plays a former Union soldier who has completely abandoned any noble ideals to become a gun runner.
Just an arms dealer seeking personal revenge for the death of his wife, Mercedes Zarro.
Right. And the setting is just crucial here. It's a desolate post-Civil War mudscape, which was shot partly at the Tor Caldara Nature Reserve in Italy.
And the sources point out that the mud isn't just bad weather. It acts as what literary critics call a pathetic fallacy.
Okay, remind me, pathetic fallacy is...
It's a great concept. It's when the physical environment mirrors the internal emotional state of the characters.
Exactly. So the mud isn't just dirt. It's a physical manifestation of their slippery, murky morality. Every single character in this movie is morally filthy.
Yeah, and they're all struggling to move forward in this literal and metaphorical muck.
And Django finds himself caught right in the middle of this muddy border town, wedged between two warring factions. On one side, you have Mexican revolutionaries led by General Hugo Rodriguez.
Right.
And on the other side, you have a private army of violently racist men led by Major Jackson. And these guys actually wear Ku Klux Klan-style red hoods.
It's intense. And they use live Mexican peons for target practice. It is genuinely stomach-churning.
It really is.
And no one is coming to save the day, There is no moral high ground. And Django's response to this world is equally extreme.
Oh, the coffin.
Yeah. That coffin he's been dragging, it doesn't hold a body. It holds a massive, devastating machine gun.
It's such a great reveal.
He opens it up and absolutely mows down Major Jackson's men in a hail of bullets, leaving exactly 48 of them alive for a final showdown. It is an incredibly iconic comic book-style visual.
Wait a second, though. I'm looking at this plot. A lone, morally ambiguous warrior wandering into a corrupt town and playing two rival gangs against each other.
Sounds familiar, right?
Yeah, I'm instantly thinking of Akira Kurosawa's samurai masterpiece, Yojimbo, or Sergio Leone's A fistful of dollars. The framework is virtually identical.
It is.
So was Corbucci actually doing something radical, or was he just ripping off his more famous buddies to make a quick buck at the box office?
Well, what's fascinating here is how Corbucci took that heavily borrowed, almost cliched framework and completely elevated it through his radical politics.
Okay, how so?
He wasn't just doing a pale imitation. He was Trojan horsing a heavy philosophical critique into a B-movie. If you look at this through a Marxist lens, like the Senses of Cinema essay does, Corbucci is exploring the concept of primitive accumulation.
Primitive accumulation. Okay, let's break that down. What does that actually look like in a spaghetti western?
Think of it as the violent Wild West phase of capitalism. It's the bloody period before there are laws, regulations, or societal norms.
There's total chaos.
Exactly. It's the incipient stage of a frontier town where the guy with the biggest gun can violently take whatever he wants, exploit whoever he wants, and then retroactively call it business.
Wow.
It's a lawless free market where human life is simultaneously treated as completely worthless, yet constantly exploited for profit.
So men like that racist Major Jackson are thriving in this unstable state because cruelty is literally the currency.
Yes. Corbucci isn't just making a fun shoot-'em-up action movie. He is creating a reactionary anti-Western that aggressively critiques colonial conquest and exploitation.
So what you're saying is, while an American Western might show the building of a town as a triumph of civilization, Corbucci shows it as a bloody, corrupt racket.
Exactly.
That totally tracks when you look at the town itself in Django.
Yeah.
The only thriving business in this entire mud soap settlement is the brothel.
Right.
It acts as a sort of neutral zone, like a cynical Switzerland in the middle of this war. Corbucci goes out of his way to portray both the racist major and the supposedly righteous revolutionaries as entirely morally bankrupt.
Yeah, both sides treat women purely as commodities to be traded or abused. It's a devastatingly bleak view of how human societies are built from the ground up. It really is. Corbucci uses the filth of the mud to expose that moral decay. But what happens when you strip all that mud away? What happens when you put those same corrupt archetypes into a blindingly white, sterile environment? That brings us to his 1968 masterpiece, The Great Silence.
Such a good film.
He flips the visual environment entirely, but keeps the political critique just as sharp. We move from churning mud to blinding existential white snow.
The contrast is unbelievable. The Great Silence is set in Snow Hill, Utah, and right from the jump, it subverts everything. It stars Jean-Louis Trintignant as a character literally called Silence.
And he's a mute gunslinger.
Right. And he doesn't just shoot to kill. His signature move is shooting off his enemies' thumbs so they can never hold a weapon again.
It's an incredibly intimate psychological form of violence. He's permanently disarming them in the most painful way possible.
And his main adversary is the total opposite of a bombastic villain. Played by Klaus Kinski, the villain is Loco, a psychopathic bounty hunter.
But Loco isn't a fiery monster, he's an accountant.
Yes, he coldly tallies his kills in a little ledger book. He views murder entirely as a business transaction. And the environment of Snow Hill is just freezing and desperate.
You have these starving outlaws hiding in the mountains, waiting for a government amnesty that is never, ever going to come.
Meanwhile, Loco is hunting them down one by one on behalf of a corrupt, evil banker named Pollicat.
Notice how Corbucci subverts the traditional authority figures here, too. In a classic John Wayne movie, the sheriff is the stoic hero holding society together.
Right, the beacon of justice.
But in The Great Silence, Sheriff Burnett is a bumbling, utterly useless fool who can't stop the violence. And the bounty hunters, who are so often romanticized as cool, lone wolf anti-heroes in other movies, are portrayed here as literal capitalist vampires.
Wow, capitalist vampires.
Yeah, they are bloodsuckers exploiting the poor and the desperate purely for cash bounties.
And the ending of this movie is legendary for how absolutely ruthless it is. The bad guys win.
They do.
Loco and his men slaughter the heroes, including Silence. It's a total massacre. And then they just ride off into the snow, completely scot-free.
Loco even makes a dark joke that they'll come back later to collect the bounties on the heroes they just murdered.
Under the guise of it all being nice and legal according to the state. It was so shockingly depressing that the legendary Hollywood producer Darryl F. Zanuck flat out refused to release the film in the US or the UK.
Yeah, they actually had to force the director to shoot alternate, tacked-on happy endings for certain international markets because studio executives thought audiences couldn't handle the despair. Zanuck's reaction kind of proves Corbucci's point, honestly. Hollywood wanted the myth that good always triumphs over evil and that the system works. Corbucci was showing history, as he believed it often actually functioned, where violence and capital win out over morality.
But here's where the creation of the art gets really interesting. You look at Silence, the mute hero. You'd think his muteness was this deeply planned, heavily symbolic choice, written to the very first draft of the script by a pretentious auteur.
Right, some deep artistic statement.
But the reality, Jean-Louis Trintignant simply couldn't speak Italian.
That's amazing.
And rather than deal with the hassle of awkwardly dubbing all his lines in post-production, Corbucci just shrugged and wrote the character as a mute. It's like a happy accident in art. It's like a painter running out of red paint and accidentally inventing a world-famous blue period.
That's a great way to put it. If we connect this to the bigger picture, though, Corbucci turns that pragmatic production hurdle into a profound philosophical statement. Silence's muteness evolves into a massive metaphor for the voicelessness of the oppressed people he is trying to protect.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
He is quite literally a voiceless hero fighting a corrupt system that simply refuses to listen.
And that reframes the entire bleak ending, doesn't it? If he's a stand-in for the voiceless, his death isn't just a shock value massacre.
Exactly. There's a brilliant perspective from a Reddit review in our sources that looks at that ending not as an exercise in despair, but as something deeply hopeful.
Hopeful, really?
Yeah. Silence walks into that final showdown knowing he is crippled, he knows he is outgunned, he knows with absolute certainty that he is going to die. But his doomed sacrifice elevates him to a martyr.
Oh.
Think of historical revolutionary figures, martyrs like Christ, Martin Luther King Jr., or Che Guevara. Silence's death isn't meaningless. The argument is that the sheer brutality of his public slaughter serves as a catalyst.
So it's a sacrifice so horrific that it ultimately forces society to condemn the bounty killers.
Yes, eventually ending that savage era. He loses his life, but he breaks the wheel.
So Corbucci is using these extreme, overwhelming visuals, the suffocating mud, the blinding snow, and this hyper-violence to deliver incredibly heavy philosophical ideas. But visuals are only half the cinematic experience.
Absolutely.
You cannot truly grasp the sensory overload of these Italian anti-Westerns without examining their auditory landscapes. We have to talk about Ennio Morricone and his wildly experimental film scores. Because the way Corbucci broke the camera rules, Morricone broke the audio rules.
Morricone is the beating heart of this genre. He moved completely away from the traditional, sweeping orchestral sounds of Hollywood Westerns.
Yeah.
If you think of the grand, majestic strings and French horns you'd hear in a John Ford movie, those instruments imply order. They imply romance, destiny, and civilization. Morricone shattered that illusion.
He really did.
His music implies chaos, bodily fluid, and primal reality.
He shattered it into a million bizarre, beautiful pieces. Look at his score for Corbucci's film Navajo Joe, which starred Burt Reynolds.
Yeah.
The main title track uses that woman's primal screech we mentioned at the very top of the show.
Which is so unsettling.
And it's immediately followed by a choir aggressively, almost violently chanting, "Never so bold." The music is so unhinged, so wildly iconic, that decades later, Quentin Tarantino used it in Kill Bill. And Alexander Payne used it in the movie Election to signal absolute psychological breakdown.
It's a score that physically commands your attention. It bypasses the intellectual brain and hits your lizard brain, and he pushed those boundaries even further. In Corbucci's Vamos a Matar Compañeros, Morricone combined this fast, frantic clip-clop rhythm with a trilling recorder.
Yeah.
And then he just has a vocalist literally shriek right in the middle of the track.
He did it in American productions, too. In Two Mules for Sister Sarah, starring Clint Eastwood, Morricone used an instrumental flutter to literally mimic the hee-haw sound of a mule.
It's brilliant.
And stepping slightly outside the Western genre, for Dario Argento's thriller The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, Morricone's score literally consists of a woman's erotic moans layered over a pulsing, rhythmic heartbeat. It is wild.
It really is.
But I have to admit, looking at all this, I had a moment of intense skepticism.
Why is that?
Well, how does the same genius composer who writes gorgeous, weeping, emotional orchestral pieces decide to use a mule's hee-haw or literal farting noises in the movie when women had tails? It almost sounds like a joke. Was he just messing with people? Was he mocking the genre?
It's a natural reaction to think it's parody, but Morricone was incredibly serious about his art. He actually despised the term spaghetti western because he felt it was patronizing, dismissive, and culturally insulting to Italians.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, he famously stated, "I'm a serious composer, not a restaurateur." He wasn't mocking the films at all.
So if traditional orchestra means civilization, what was he trying to say with the shrieks and the hee-haws?
He was matching the director's avant-garde tone. Corbucci was creating violently exaggerated comic book-style visual landscapes full of mud and blood. If Morricone had layered a traditional romantic John Ford score over Franco Nero dragging a machine gun inside a coffin, the music would have felt like a lie.
It would have been absurd.
Exactly. Morricone's bizarre, aggressive soundscapes using human breath, animal noises, and guttural screams as musical instruments were the only way to ground the visual panache on screen. He took the ugly grit of the films and elevated it to the level of grand opera.
So the music had to be as muddy and snowy and unapologetically violent as the images themselves, to be honest.
I love that. So we've established the incredible subversive DNA of Corbucci's visuals and Morricone's sounds. Now we jump forward.
Fast forwarding a few decades.
We have to look at how that specific DNA didn't just fade away, but was actively resurrected decades later. That brings us to Quentin Tarantino and his 2015 film, The Hateful Eight. Tarantino didn't just borrow from Corbucci and Morricone, he essentially built a cinematic shrine to them. The Hateful Eight is fundamentally a ranch house invasion story.
A ranch house invasion.
Yeah, it takes its narrative cues from old TV westerns like The Virginian or Bonanza, specifically those tense episodes where a bunch of dangerous guest stars take over a single location and hold the main characters hostage.
But the Corbucci influence is the engine of the movie. Tarantino basically took the entire premise of The Great Silence, a group of hateful, morally bankrupt bounty killers trapped together in a snowy rooming house during a blinding blizzard, and built his movie around it.
Completely.
And the aesthetic connections are everywhere. Tarantino instructed his costume designer to obsessively study the work of Carlos Simi, the man who designed the costumes for Django and The Great Silence.
Oh, absolutely. That bulky, imposing military batwing cape that Samuel L. Jackson wears in The Hateful Eight, that is pulled straight out of the Italian Sartana films. It has that specific comic book fetishistic quality that defines the 1960s Italian anti-Western.
And then, of course, there is the audio. Tarantino managed the impossible. He got Ennio Morricone to write his first original Western score in 34 years.
Which is a huge deal.
And Morricone finally won a Solo Academy Award for it, which is staggering when you consider his legendary career. But what's brilliant is how Morricone approached it. To pad out the runtime of the score, they actually utilized some unused tracks Morricone had written decades earlier for John Carpenter's sci-fi horror film, The Thing.
Which is so perfect.
Yeah.
The Thing is also about a group of paranoid men trapped in the freezing snow, starring Kurt Russell, who is also in The Hateful Eight.
Right. The cross-pollination of paranoia is brilliant. But beyond the music and the costumes, the most fascinating technical choice Tarantino made was the camera itself. He insisted on shooting The Hateful Eight using vintage Ultra Panavision 70 lenses.
Yeah, these are massive 65mm lenses that yield this ultra-wide 2.76:1 aspect ratio. These specific lenses hadn't been used on a feature film since Khartoum in 1966.
And he coupled those massive lenses with an absolutely grueling physical environment. Tarantino literally chilled the Hollywood soundstage down to 30 degrees Fahrenheit so you could see the actor's actual breath freezing in the air.
Recreating the miserable reality of The Great Silence.
Right. He wasn't just paying homage to Corbucci's Snow. He was forcing modern, comfortable Hollywood actors to physically experience the brutal, unforgiving environment that those Italian auteurs believed is the true nature of the world.
Yeah, no acting required when you're literally freezing.
Exactly. But I have to say, the lens choice feels like a massive paradox. He used the widest, grandest lenses in cinematic history, lenses usually reserved for sprawling, epic deserts or massive chariot races, like in Ben-Hur 2 shoot a movie where 8 people are trapped inside a single claustrophobic cabin.
It does seem counterintuitive.
It's like renting out an entire 80,000-seat stadium just to host a tense, silent game of chess between 2 people. Why do that?
Well, this raises an important question about cinematic space and intimacy. When the studio executives asked Tarantino that exact question, arguing that 70mm was a complete waste of money for what is essentially a set-bound parlor play, he had a brilliant defense.
Which was?
Tarantino argued that the 70mm format isn't just for capturing the vastness of the Sahara Desert. For him, the human face is a landscape.
The human face as a landscape. That
Yeah.
completely changes how you watch a movie.
Exactly. By shooting multiple characters in a confined space with these incredibly wide, high-resolution lenses, it allowed for what he called theatrical blocking.
Theatrical blocking, okay.
Yeah, when you are looking at one character speaking in the foreground, the lens is so wide and sharp that you can see exactly what the other 7 characters in the background are doing. In a whodunit mystery where everyone is lying, seeing the background reactions is critical.
Ah, so you're seeing everyone's micro-expressions.
You are watching all the weasels trapped in the bag at the exact same time. It puts you right inside Minnie's haberdashery with them. Tarantino takes a camera format meant to capture vastness and uses it to create an inescapable, terrifying intimacy.
So what does this all mean? We started today with a lone man dragging a heavy coffin through the mud, accompanied by a screeching, chaotic soundtrack.
Yeah, a long way from a snowy cabin in 70mm.
And going through all of this, it becomes incredibly clear that the 1960s Italian Western was never just some cheap, throwaway imitation of Hollywood. Through Corbucci's muddy political critiques and existential snow, and through Morricone's shrieking, brilliant physiological scores, they created a deeply subversive art form.
They aggressively stripped away the polite myths of the American West.
They forced audiences to face the brutal realities of greed, violence, and exploitation. And in doing so, they laid the absolute groundwork for modern auteurs like Tarantino to continue pushing the boundaries of what cinema can do.
It completely reframes how we look at genre film, and it leaves us with something really important to consider. If a violent 1960s B-movie filled with fake mud, KKK allegories, and eccentric hee-hawing music can actually serve as a profound, enduring critique of modern society and capitalism, well, what current lowbrow or trashy pop culture genres are we snobbishly dismissing today? What seemingly disposable, messy entertainment right now might actually be holding the most accurate, uncompromising mirror up to our modern world?